December 19th, 1944. 3 days into Germany's last gamble in the West. Snow blankets the Ardennes. American lines are torn open, and panic is spreading through Allied headquarters. The story most people know says the Battle of the Bulge turns when American tanks finally reach Bastogne a week later. But that version misses the real moment when the German offensive began to fail. The truth is far more unsettling and far more interesting. By the time a single tank from Patton's Third Army fires a shot near Bastogne, the German plan is already unraveling. Not because of what Patton has done, but because of what German commanders believe he is about to do. This battle is not decided by who is fighting at Bastogne. It is decided by a force that has not arrived yet, and by the fear it creates before it ever appears. If you want to understand how wars are actually won, not with hero charges, but with timing, movement, and psychology, stay with this story. And if you value deep World War II analysis like this, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because this is exactly the kind of history we uncover here. Now, while American paratroopers dig frozen foxholes around Bastogne, General George Patton is more than 50 miles away, locked in combat near Saarbrücken, pushing east against German defenses in the Saar. On paper, he is irrelevant to the crisis in the Ardennes. German planners believe the Americans will need days, maybe a week, to react to the surprise offensive. That assumption is the foundation of the entire German plan. It is also already wrong. On the morning of December 19th, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force calls an emergency meeting at Verdun. Eisenhower is there. Bradley is there. Patton arrives knowing something the others do not. While they're still trying to understand how deep the German breakthrough really is, Patton has already been planning how to exploit it. Maps are spread across the table. Reports are grim. German armor columns have punched deep into American lines. Roads are clogged. Entire divisions are cut off. Eisenhower needs reserves immediately or the front may collapse. Patton studies the situation for only a few minutes before he speaks. What he offers shocks everyone in the room. He says he can turn Third Army north, pivoting 90 degrees while still engaged with the enemy, and strike the southern flank of the German penetration. Not in a week, not in 5 days, in 48 hours. 3 divisions. Full combat power. Silence follows. What Patton proposes is not bold. It is borderline impossible. Disengaging a field army from active combat, rerouting tens of thousands of men and vehicles through winter conditions, and attacking in a completely different sector normally takes weeks of preparation. But Patton is not improvising. Eisenhower does not know it yet, but this plan already exists. Since the first reports of the German offensive on December 16th, Patton has quietly ordered his staff to prepare contingency plans for exactly this situation. Routes have been identified, fuel requirements calculated, timetables written. When Eisenhower finally asks if Patton can do it, Patton already knows the answer. Eisenhower approves the move because there is no alternative. By early afternoon, Patton is gone, issuing orders. That evening, Third Army begins to disengage. Divisions pull out of the line with precision. Movement orders are so detailed that battalion commanders do not need clarification. Columns start rolling north before midnight. And this is where the battle truly begins to change because the Germans are watching. Despite bad weather, German intelligence detects the movement almost immediately. Radio intercepts spike. Reconnaissance aircraft catch glimpses of American columns heading north. By the morning of December 20th, German High Command knows Patton is coming. They do not know exactly when. They do not know exactly where. But they know enough to panic. The entire German offensive is built on speed and surprise. Patton's movement destroys both. Before Third Army reaches the Ardennes, German commanders begin to react. Reserves are held back. Fuel allocations are reconsidered. Units meant to drive west are ordered to prepare defenses facing south. All of this happens before a single American tank arrives. The German plan is no longer unfolding as designed. It is already being reshaped by fear of a force that is still on the road. By the morning of December 20th, 1944, German High Command fully understands the danger Patton represents. even though his army is still days away from direct combat. This realization triggers a chain reaction that begins to choke the German offensive from the inside. The Ardennes plan assumes American paralysis, confusion, and delay. It assumes that no large-scale counterattack can threaten the flanks for at least a week. Patton's movement shatters that assumption in less than 24 hours. Reports reach Army Group B confirming that Third Army is disengaging from the Saar and moving north in force. For German commanders, this is a nightmare scenario. A strong American army striking from the south would cut supply routes, isolate forward panzer formations, and potentially collapse the entire offensive. The response is immediate and revealing. 5th Panzer Army, commanded by Otto von Manschenfeld, receives orders to detach armored reserves originally intended to exploit the breakthrough toward the Meuse River. Elements of elite panzer divisions are pulled away from the westward drive and repositioned defensively to guard against a threat that has not yet materialized. This single decision costs the German advance precious time. Hours turn into half a day. Momentum slows. Fuel consumption rises without corresponding gains. At 7th Army Headquarters, responsible for the southern sector of the offensive, staff officers calculate timelines. Their estimate is alarming. If Patton continues at this pace, an American attack from the south is possible as early as December 22nd. Orders go out to subordinate corps to shift priorities. Units that should be pushing west are instructed to secure the southern flank instead. Dig in. Prepare defenses. Delay becomes survival. What is happening here is subtle but decisive. The German offensive is transitioning from exploitation to consolidation before it has achieved its main objectives. And fuel, the lifeblood of the operation, becomes the central concern. German planners built the Ardennes offensive around the capture of American fuel dumps. Panzer units are advancing on calculated reserves, expecting to refuel from captured supplies before running dry. Now that assumption collapses. Quartermasters are forced to recalculate. Instead of pushing fuel forward aggressively, reserves are held back to support defensive operations against Third Army. Panzer divisions that should be racing west are told to conserve fuel. The offensive spirit that made the plan viable begins to die under the weight of logistics and fear. Then comes Bastogne. Under the original German plan, Bastogne is an inconvenience, not a prize. The town sits astride key roads, but can be bypassed and masked by minimal forces while mobile units continue west. The garrison can be contained and dealt with later. Patton's approach changes everything. Bastogne now lies directly on the axis of a potential American counterattack from the south. Leaving a hostile force there is no longer acceptable. German command decides Bastogne must be taken quickly before Third Army arrives. This decision is crucial and disastrous. Instead of bypassing the town, German forces begin diverting combat power to capture it. Units that should be driving toward the Meuse are now attacking prepared defenses in wooded, elevated terrain that favors the defender. By December 21st, significant German formations are engaged around Bastogne, not because it fits the original plan, but because Patton's movement has made it unavoidable. The entire southern portion of the German offensive is now oriented toward defense and containment rather than exploitation. None of this is the result of direct combat with Third Army. It is the result of anticipation. German commanders are fighting a battle that has not yet arrived. And while German forces shift, dig in, and burn fuel without advancing, Third Army continues its movement north. 60,000 men, hundreds of tanks, thousands of vehicles execute one of the most complex maneuvers in American military history. Roads are icy. Refugees clog routes. Units are still disengaging from active combat. Yet the movement proceeds with precision because it is not improvised. Detailed movement tables dictate who moves where and when. Military police control intersections. Fuel points are established in advance. Divisions move on separate routes to avoid congestion. And, crucially, the weather that grounds Allied aircraft also blinds the Luftwaffe. German intelligence knows Patton is coming, but cannot see him clearly. That uncertainty magnifies fear. When you cannot see the enemy, you assume the worst. By the evening of December 21st, lead elements of the 4th Armored Division reach assembly areas south of the Ardennes, ready to attack. The German offensive, meanwhile, is no longer racing west. It is bracing for impact from the south, and the most important shift has already occurred. German forces are defending when they should be attacking. December 21st through December 23rd, 1944, the battle around Bastogne begins to evolve under pressure that has little to do with the men actually fighting there and everything to do with the clock that is now working against the Germans. By the time German units complete the encirclement of Bastogne, the decision to capture the town has already reshaped the southern half of the offensive. Under the original plan, Bastogne would have been masked and ignored, its defenders isolated but not immediately destroyed. That approach would have preserved German momentum and avoided costly fights in unfavorable terrain. But Patton's approach makes delay unacceptable. A hostile garrison sitting astride the road network becomes a threat to German survival once Third Army arrives. German commanders conclude that Bastogne must fall quickly, even if it costs them time and strength they cannot afford to lose. As a result, forces that should be driving west are instead committed to deliberate attacks against a well-prepared defensive position. Elements of Panzer-Lehr Division, the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, and later the 15th Panzergrenadier Division are drawn into the fight. These are not second-line troops. They represent valuable combat power that was meant to exploit the breakthrough, not grind itself down in forested hills and frozen villages. The terrain around Bastogne is terrible for attackers. Dense woods limit armor. Roads funnel movement into predictable approaches. The town sits on high ground, giving defenders excellent fields of fire. American engineers have prepared obstacles. The 101st Airborne, reinforced by armor and artillery, is exactly the kind of force designed to hold under pressure. German attacks on December 22nd are aggressive but costly. Progress is measured in yards. Casualties mount. Ammunition is expended at a rate that cannot be sustained. Artillery pounds American positions, but the defenders hold. The siege becomes a race, not just against resistance, but against time. Every German commander around Bastogne understands the same truth. Third Army is coming from the south. Every hour spent here is an hour not spent advancing west. This urgency distorts German decision-making. Attacks are pressed when conditions are unfavorable. Units are committed piecemeal instead of massed deliberately. Losses that would normally trigger a pause are accepted because stopping feels more dangerous than continuing. Meanwhile, the weather that initially helped the German offensive now works against it. Snow and cloud cover limit movement and strain supply lines. Fuel shortages worsen as reserves are held back to counter Patton rather than pushed forward. On December 23rd, the weather finally begins to clear. American aircraft return to the skies, dropping supplies into Bastogne and attacking German positions. The resupply does not end the siege, but it stabilizes it. The garrison can now hold longer. That matters because the entire German plan around Bastogne is built on speed. Capture the town before Third Army arrives. Eliminate the threat. Resume the advance. But the clock is slipping. While German forces hammer Bastogne, Third Army continues to close the distance. The 4th Armored Division refuels, reorganizes, and prepares to attack. The 26th and 80th Infantry Divisions move into position on the flanks. What makes this moment decisive is not the fighting that is about to happen, but what has already been lost. German exploitation momentum is gone. Fuel has been consumed without gain. Elite units are tied down in a battle they were never supposed to fight. The offensive that was meant to reach the Meuse River by Christmas is now focused on survival. By the night of December 23rd, the German situation is precarious. They have not taken Bastogne. They have not broken the American defense. And they have not stopped Patton. The irony is sharp. German forces are pouring effort into Bastogne precisely because they fear Third Army. Yet every hour they do so makes Third Army's eventual attack more dangerous. The siege continues, but its purpose has quietly changed. It is no longer about opening roads west. It is about preventing collapse from the south. And that is a fight the Germans are already losing, even though Patton has not yet fired his opening shot. December 24th, 1944 arrives with no dramatic breakthrough, no sudden collapse, and no heroic rescue yet visible on the ground. But by this point, the outcome of Germany's Ardennes offensive is already slipping beyond recovery. On this morning, Patton's Third Army finally attacks, driving north into the southern flank of the German salient, exactly where German commanders feared it would. The 4th Armored Division leads the advance, supported on the flanks by the 26th and 80th Infantry Divisions. The Germans they encounter are not surprised, not disorganized, and not weak. They are dug in, prepared, and determined because they have spent the last several days repositioning specifically to meet this threat. Progress is slow. Tanks advance by short bounds. Infantry clears forests village by village. Artillery pounds defensive positions before every movement. Miles are measured carefully, sometimes painfully. From a purely tactical perspective, the fighting is hard and costly. Yet this is where many historical accounts lose the thread. The difficulty of the advance is often portrayed as evidence that the battle's outcome was still uncertain. In reality, the opposite is true. The strength of the German defense is proof that the decisive phase has already passed. German forces are defending when they should be exploiting. They are trading space for time when the original plan demanded speed and shock. The resistance Third Army encounters is not a sign of German strength, but of German desperation. Every German unit facing south is a unit not driving west. Every shell fired at Patton's columns is fuel and ammunition not supporting the offensive's main effort. And that main effort, by now, has stalled completely. German panzer formations that were meant to be racing toward the Meuse River are instead immobilized by fuel shortages, exhausted crews, and conflicting orders. The dream of capturing Allied fuel dumps has evaporated. Quartermasters can no longer support sustained offensive action. The German High Command understands this, even if it refuses to admit it openly. The Ardennes offensive has become a holding operation disguised as an attack. Around Bastogne, the situation reflects the same reality. German forces continue to assault American positions, but the urgency that once drove these attacks now works against them. Casualties accumulate. Elite formations are worn down. The defenders, though battered, know that relief is coming. The attackers know they are running out of time. On December 25th, German assaults intensify in a final attempt to break the town before Patton arrives. They fail. The terrain, the weather, and the defenders all favor delay, and delay is fatal to the German plan. Meanwhile, Third Army keeps moving. The 4th Armored Division pushes forward through stiff resistance, expanding its penetration mile by mile. The infantry divisions widen the corridor, securing supply lines and preventing German counterattacks from sealing the breach. This is not a dramatic dash. It is a methodical, grinding advance. But significance lies not in speed, but in inevitability. By now, German commanders understand that even if they somehow capture Bastogne, it will not save the offensive. Too much time has been lost. Too much fuel has been burned. Too many forces have been diverted. The German advance has reached its culminating point. It can no longer sustain itself. What remains is withdrawal, though no one is ready to call it that yet. The irony is complete. The German army launched its last great offensive to regain the initiative in the West. Instead, it has expended its remaining armored strength, reacting to an American movement that began before the first counterattack was launched. Patton's attack on December 24th does not create the German failure. It merely exposes it. The battle is no longer about whether Bastogne will be relieved. It is about how quickly the Germans can disengage without collapsing entirely. And as Christmas passes under gray skies and frozen ground, the answer becomes painfully clear. The Germans have lost the operational initiative, and they will never regain it. December 26th, 1944, American tanks from the 4th Armored Division finally break through to Bastogne and establish contact with the besieged garrison. History remembers this moment as the dramatic rescue, the instant when Patton saves the 101st Airborne and turns the Battle of the Bulge. But that interpretation confuses confirmation with cause. The relief of Bastogne does not defeat the German offensive. It merely confirms a defeat that has already occurred. By the time Third Army reaches the town, the German plan is beyond recovery. The offensive that was meant to split the Allied armies and capture Antwerp has failed to reach the Meuse River. Fuel shortages cripple mobility. Panzer divisions are exhausted. Units that should have been exploiting West are tied down defending against threats that should never have existed under the original plan. The decisive moment did not occur. On December 26th, it occurred days earlier when German intelligence confirmed that Patton was moving north. From that moment forward, German commanders stopped acting like attackers and started acting like men trying to survive an unfolding disaster. The operational choices made between December 19th and December 23rd sealed the outcome. Reserves were diverted. Fuel was hoarded. Bastogne became an obsession rather than a bypassed obstacle. The offensive lost its speed, and without speed, it lost everything. The Germans never reached the fuel dumps they needed. They never achieved operational freedom of movement. They never regained the initiative. What followed in the weeks after Bastogne was not a continuation of a viable offensive, but a slow, grinding withdrawal under increasing Allied pressure. By late January 1945, the Bulge is erased, but the cost to Germany is irreversible. Armored reserves that cannot be replaced are gone. Experienced crews are dead or captured. The Western Front is permanently weakened. When Allied forces resume their advance toward the Rhine, they face an enemy that can no longer mount large-scale counteroffensives. The Ardennes gamble, intended to change the course of the war, instead accelerates its end. What makes this story important is not Patton's reputation or his personality, but the lesson it reveals about how wars are actually decided. Battles are not always won where the fighting is heaviest. Sometimes they are won by movement, by timing, and by forcing the enemy to react before they are ready. Patton did not defeat the German offensive by smashing through defenses at Bastogne. He defeated it by making German commanders change their plans, shift their priorities, and burn resources in response to a threat that had not yet arrived. The movement of Third Army was not just a maneuver. It was a psychological weapon. It forced the Germans to fight the battle they feared instead of the one they planned. And once that happened, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Battle of the Bulge is often remembered as a desperate defensive victory snatched from the brink of disaster. In reality, it was an operational victory achieved through preparation, speed, and pressure applied at exactly the right moment. When American tanks rolled into Bastogne on December 26th, they were not saving a lost cause. They were arriving at a battlefield that had already been shaped in their favor by decisions made days earlier. The relief of Bastogne was the visible symbol of German failure, not its cause. The real defeat began when German intelligence reported that Patton was moving north, and everything after that was simply the unfolding consequence. If this analysis changed the way you think about the Battle of the Bulge, let me know in the comments because I read them all and they shape future videos. Share this story with anyone who loves World War II history because this is the kind of detail that rarely gets discussed. And if you want more deep, analytical breakdowns like this, make sure you are subscribed to WW2 History Insights because this channel exists to go beyond the surface and show how history really happened.